Welcome to the Craftsman Online Podcast. This is a weekly program focused on the relevant topics in Freemasonry and the various aspects of the craft. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, Editor-in-Chief of CraftsmanOnline.com, and this is a first for us, and we are so excited to have him. Please make welcome the most worshipful, Richard R.J. Kessler, Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New York. Welcome to Craftsman Online.
Thank you for the invite.
I'm excited to learn more about you and the term and the year that you've laid out for us. I think a lot of brothers picked up the Empire State Mason to kick off the beginning of the year, and we're reading through your vision, and I can't wait to hear more about how Masons make a difference. So, it's not very often we get a Grandmaster to join us on the podcast, and while New York is not the largest geographic jurisdiction, we certainly have the most diverse brotherhood throughout our regions, and I think a lot of brothers look forward to when you visit their lodges or districts. So take us back to the beginning of your Masonic journey. If you don't mind, what led you to knock on the door of a lodge, and how did it feel once you were elected, installed, and my favorite, proclaimed Grand Master in New York?
I did not come through the traditional doorway. The lodge that I did petition and became a Master Mason in was Occidental Lodge number 766. Now, at that time, I was the president of a youth hockey organization, and the Occidental Lodge was a sponsor of us. And somewhere down the line, we had a pig roast, and we were invited to come for it. And so I was introduced to the craft then, and it was one where my wife was also able to come there. I was at the picnic. I was actually really surprised at the number of people. At that time, I didn't know they were brothers that were a member of this craft. I've met them in a number of other youth organizations. I've met them in sports activities. And in fact, the very building next door to where our lodge was a sports center where I used to play basketball forever. And I never in my wildest dreams ever gave an idea of just what that building was. So while we're at this picnic, my wife, as always, usually is the one that starts the reading, and she started looking at it and she said, "Why? I think this is something that may work for you. I think this is going to settle a lot of your other problems. It looks like they take care of a lot of your thoughts and processes about being in an organization, and they take care of one another and they take care of their families." So I had some more conversations, and I was on the grill, and my only demand to them is that in order for me to come there, they would have to take the grease-spattered petition, and they said they didn't care whether it was charred on the side. How did I feel when I was Grand Master? Well, let me go back one step further. When I was appointed Grand Lecturer by Most Worshipful Thomas, I was definitely heads over heels. This, as far as I was concerned, was my dream job. I was able to go out and mingle with all of the brothers in New York State for 4 years and to learn more than I actually taught. To say that when I was elected Grand Master and, as you say, proclaimed, it just blew me totally away, because something that we did plan for, the closer we kept getting to it, the farther it was away. This pandemic really played, havoc with a lot of people's dreams. But I knew the next logical step for me to go was from Grand Lecturer was to go to Grand Master, because I did have some plans, and I did have a core of great individuals that shared in my plan, and in many cases enhanced it. So I was very, very happy, not just for me, but for all of those that have worked so hard to see that this jurisdiction can go forward, especially all that we've accomplished during the pandemic.
I appreciate you sharing the background, because, for brothers that are trying to put this all into context, New York is one of those rare states where, yes, you can leave one part of it down in the city or out in Long Island, and you could realistically make it out to Buffalo maybe in like a day's drive, conservatively, speed limit and bathroom breaks and gas breaks accordingly. But what I've always found interesting is getting the chance to talk to Grand Line officers and realizing that in a craft or an organization where there's over 33,000 men, that there are the few that get to have that position. And what excited me was to read the winter edition of the Empire State Mason, and you outlined a lot of your goals for what you wanted to do as Grand Master. And what struck me is that, one, you embrace the idea of servant leadership, where you're here to serve the craft, but you also have a top priority to build a strategic vision around the idea of value and membership and the word we when it comes to working with Grand Lodge. Where did the basis of that idea come from, and how are you using this to be the driver for your goals this year?
When I was growing up, I was really more task oriented than I am now, and thankfully, with the help of a lot of people, I was taught that was actually a more labor intensive way of going about building structures, building people, building team, because each time you completed a task, you had to start from the get-go again. So it was very easy for me once I realized that once I had a core of individuals that were of the same like for the most part as me, but different skill sets. And the other thing I realized is that I didn't have to be the master of all those skill sets. It would be a lot of wasted time. So if I had people around me that had the same type vision, and at this time, let me be quite honest with you, I didn't know where I was going to go and whether or not those other brothers were going to actually be in this spot except instead of me. So we work for membership, and it's the two-prong, as you know, recruitment and retention. Now, recruitment, as hard as it may seem, is actually the easiest task. If we have a consistent website, and that's part of what we're doing, we're going to reestablish our branding so people know what we stand for. They know what the square and compass is, but they don't necessarily know what we stand for. So with the website, communications, and face-to-face, we have to have consistent messaging, no matter where we're at. It always has to be the same. And we need to make sure that the message that we send to the outside world, as well as the message we send to our brothers within our fraternity, is what we want them to get out of it. We want to make sure that the words, the messaging that we use are what they are going to react to positively. And our retention, part of what we've done is we found out that there was a tremendous need while we were at the pandemic for brothers that needed education. They wanted ritualistic programs. They wanted training. So we went out and we worked, and with the help of the Masonic Hall and Home, we are going to embark shortly within this month, next month, March. We're going to have our first set of train-the-trainers from the Maxwell Leadership Program. Now, training the leadership that we have now, many times in our state, I've seen enough of the training, but it never goes down. I've never been one to believe in a trickle-down philosophy. It just doesn't work. We have to bring in and we have to immerse all of our individual lodges into this. We have to give them not only a tool belt, but we have to give them the tools to put into it. We have to give them the leadership, the skills that they need. They need administrative skills. They need to know how to operate an organization. So we have to deliver to those lodges and members and new candidates exactly what we pledged. And what we're pledging them is to have a learning environment where, depending on where the program is going to go, you are going to be able to help yourself, not only through Masonry, but also the skill sets that we're going to hopefully teach you are going to help you in your private life, in your business life. These are tried and true. And I believe that the only way that we can succeed is that if we continue to plant the seeds into the lowest common denominator, and that for the administrative structure is the individual lodge. The old adage is you're only as strong as your weakest link, why maybe is overused, but in this case it really is. In your introduction at the beginning, you mentioned how diverse New York State is. One would never think that this state had such diversity in everything, in cultures, from being very rural to the cosmopolitan of New York City, all the way to the right, all the way to the left, and everything in between, all different nationalities, all different types of religion. But what I pledge is that diversity we're going to use as a strength, because we're going to bring the strengths of each and every one of these divergent organizations and coalesce them into one. And by that, we will be stronger.
I want to talk about the role of the Grand Master a little as we get into your plan. I think it's unfortunate there might be some brothers listening to our podcast who only hear of Grand Lodge or the Grand Master when the secretary is reading the correspondence during our local meetings, twice a month. And getting the chance to actually meet and talk with you, again, as you said, because of the diversity in our lodge, with the distances, it may be hard to cross paths with you. I'm interested in learning, as someone who is going through the local lodge leadership steps of getting into the officer line and learning the chairs and going, how have those lessons from your local lodge helped you when it comes to strategically planning for what you want to accomplish on a Grand Lodge level?
The magnitude is all that really changed, Mike. Only the magnitude. Same skill sets that got you to work on the individual level is what will continue to help you as you pass through. And one of the major lessons I learned is that I didn't know everything, and we have that lesson in the middle chamber lecture about the attentive ear. We're always great with the instructive tongue, but listening is a skill that is not shared by a lot of individuals. We hear, but sometimes we're already preparing our answer before we actually get the response from that individual. And that is shortchanging not only him, but it's shortchanging us and the fraternity as a whole. So part of what we're going to do, because there are so many things that have been really put on a back burner because of this pandemic, such as dedications, rededications, going to lodges. During this pandemic, we really found out just how important that this community leans on Freemasonry. And part of that led us to the introduction of the new Teddy Roosevelt Award.
And I love the idea of engaging the community with the Teddy Roosevelt Award, the Theodore Roosevelt Award. Worshipful Brother Ron Seafried has corrected me enough that it's not Teddy, it's Theodore. Can you give us a little insight into how you came up with that and the goal that you have? I know that you want to present it to brothers and also members of the law enforcement community, but tell us how this came up, because I think this is a great vision.
It was a dynamic individual, and just like everybody else, he had just as many faults as the rest of us. But generally speaking, when he had a vision, he would touch base with those that he honored their input. And he didn't always follow them, but he would look toward making a change. Some of the things, as you look past that he's done now, if you put it into the 21st century, aren't that positive. But I've also been one to believe that you have to judge somebody by the set of circumstances that they were dealt with when they were living. It's easy to go back 100 years and say, gee, why did he do that? Why did he do that? Because you don't know what was there. So I've done a lot of reading on it. And I really liked the way he embraced the community. I mean, he went to the point when he was police commissioner, he would walk out after he was done with his evening and walk and talk to the beat cops. He would talk to them, ask them what they were going to do. He was probably the most recognizable person in New York City. He just was everywhere, and and he just did what you needed to do to connect. And he had an award that he took care of with the police, because he always thought that they were understood and they generally were put, and generally speaking, they were only mentioned when something was negative. And he wanted to make sure that people would see them as people. They would see them as neighbors just as they are, and know that, yeah, they have faults, but there's a lot of important things they do. Some of them are very insignificant, but you don't know how that changes somebody's life. So when we were talking about what we could do to help this community of New York State, we thought that in the atmosphere that is going now with so much negativity, we needed to find a way of doing something positive. And so that linkage, going to Teddy Roosevelt, who was already a hero of mine, it was an easy push forward.
And it really falls in line with your vision of Masons making a difference. The first time I got a chance to meet you was at a lodge dedication in Rochester, and you had spoken that at this dedication of a lodge and it was the first time to get to see the Grand Line do that, and you made the comment that this was the first time that this had happened since the age of Gatsby, and I was blown away. And what I think is so beautiful about this is the idea that many small things have to happen so that the big thing can happen. And what we're looking for is a difference in brightness and vision and positivity after this dark time of the pandemic that we've all gone through. And it's refreshing to hear a leader speak of, we're going to turn this corner and we're going to start building again. And I want to get to that point because during the public health emergency, we had to cancel a lot of our in-person meetings. And one of the benefits, if there was a silver lining, was that Masonic education became incredibly popular with our members through virtual or online meetings. And this is something that you've embraced as a possible strength in a growth area. What opportunities do you see Grand Lodge doing soon to pursue digital learning and provide that for brothers in the coming months?
We discovered that there was such a thirst for these programs. It actually initially started when we were trying to find out how we were going to train the new district officers. So we kept batting things around, and with the help of Dan and a lot of the other brothers in leadership and education, we really struck on, let's do some Zoom meetings. And so we started it, and we would do it on ritual, and we did it on leadership. And what we found out is that our numbers kept getting larger. The questions that they were asking were getting more profound. They were getting to the core of what we need to do as a fraternity to propel ourselves forward. They were asking for more. Now, we have a ton of courses, and we are going to continue to teach online. We're going to teach in person. We're going to teach regionally. We're going to use all that's before us. The online capability that we found is just too great for us to say, okay, now we're meeting in person, let's put it aside. We can meet so many people that need this. We are tailoring, that's one of the reasons why the leadership and education was broken up into 3 different core groups, so we could attack the need of getting programs that are needed and desired by our brothers. Let me put it this way. We're going to bring back a lot of that. We're actually thinking of doing it, different course studies that we're going to give you certificates in certain areas that you have completed an area, say in administration, say you took a course in public speaking. We're going to work on that. If you're going to do something on fundraising, we're going to open it up to anything that you can possibly think of. And we're going to keep doing this. Our education is going to center on, of course, ritualistic needs. That one you have to be, of course, a little bit more careful for because of you have to make sure that everybody in there is a master mason. It's going to be leadership. We need a ton of leadership within our fraternity. Leaders are not leaders just because they're given a title. I think most people know that. They need the training. They need the skill sets. In our fraternity, we always complain about how quick some brothers move up to the east. But we should also be thanking them that they're willing to take this on. But they don't know what they're taking on. A comment that I use periodically is they don't know what they don't know. And that's true. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure that we give them the foundation, we give them the training, we give them the history of how we came about. We have to give them fun topics that they can go out and get it about. We have to immerse new brothers within and encourage them to give maybe a 2 or 3 minute talk on what the apron presentation meant to them when they came in, for example. Just simple to get them into the flow of what makes their lodge work. Development that we're going to do is, as I said, is the Masonic University of New York. So we're going to try and embrace everything. We're going to go where everybody needs to go. We have been held back on some things because we didn't know when the grand session was actually going to happen. But now we're going full forward. So I think that the brothers are going to still be surprised when they find out just how broad this topic is. The core of brothers that are in the leadership and education are unbelievable. They continually come up with new ideas. They come up with the ideas actually before I even ask for them. It's almost as though they're reading my mind, or they're into my dreams of what I want to do. And that's the reason why we have success, because we're all on that same page. We all know that same level we have to go at. We have to improve our quality. Numbers are wonderful. Wonderful is what your numbers. So you can't, that pays the bill. But what we really need is the brother that's going to work in the quarry. And mentioning that as the trowel is very important to me. When I was a know-it-all worshipful master, I had a program in place, and Grandmaster Smith pulled me aside and said, I think you may want to change this a little bit and go this way. And of course, he was right. At the end of the day, he presented me a trowel that he autographed. And so he asked me, why I gave you this? And so I was going to come up with some big ritual meaning for it. He goes, no. He goes, I just want you to remember that the trowel is to remember that you're always in the quarry. And hopefully you will be in the quarries of Freemasonry until your dying breath. And so it was only fitting, it was only apropos that I made that part of the cufflinks that we gave out, and also part of my pin.
I love that you're a guy that symbolism is important. And I want to touch on one of your favorite Masons, Theodore Roosevelt, great president, known. Thank you for sharing the story of, the beat cop and getting on the street and being engaged with the community. Of course, another famous Roosevelt that was a president and a brother, used radio at the time for fireside chats to kind of bring together the nation during World War II. I'm excited because we're starting a partnership with Craftsman Online so that we can help you reach the brothers across New York State. Do you want to tell us more about that?
That program brought speakers from all over the world, all walks of life, gave us an idea of how Masonry works not just in New York, but in other states, that while ours is what we are used to, what we think is the best, it's not always the case. We have to listen to what others are doing and find out what they have done that is working, what they may be doing that's not working, how they may have addressed it, and we may have an idea to help them. So with the Craftsman Online working in step, becoming under the one giant umbrella of New York State free and accepted masonry, is the logical step. It's to keep us all together. Also, just to let you know, is when we're doing training and that all encompassing, on this a little bit off the task of what you're going to do, the Scottish Rite has an Excelsior program that's also leadership and education. And with the help of the deputy, illustrious Mike Morris, we're going to embrace them, and we're going to go back and forth across those boundaries. So my ultimate dream is to just obliterate those boundaries. At the end of the day, we took the same obligations. We can't pick and choose which we like. And if we truly learn the lessons of those degrees, if we learn the lessons from the charges that we gave, if we live according to the principles and tenets and the obligations that we took, we can't help but come to the aid of each other. There's no one. It just can't be one. I mean, technically, I'm the Grand Master, so I'm the one. But as soon as I start thinking that, I lose. There's a disconnect, and I think we've seen this in all different walks of life. Is that when all of a sudden the leader just begins to think that he has the answer because he is the leader. So I'm looking forward to all of the input. I unfortunately have not caught a lot of the Craftsman Online, but I do know that they are recorded, and so I will find some time to catch up to them. And so I hope that gives the members of our fraternity an idea that this is it's not a new concept, but yet it is a new concept. Working together for one goal, and that's the betterment of society in which we live. And that's why when people ask me about Freemasonry's future in the world, I say, I hope for God's sake that it's there, because we truly need it, because the principles and tenets that we use, that we are taught to embrace, not just accept diversity, it's our strength, that we're willing to listen to each other, that we're willing to go a different direction because it's less intrusive on somebody's life, somebody's lifestyle. Then we're starting to make serious steps. And as you know, the making the difference wasn't easy. I had so many as we were coming through. And it was quite simple as why I chose the making a difference. And that's because we did. During this pandemic, each and every one of you did more than you ever thought you were going to do. You cut lawns, you had food drives, you had clothing drives, you had pet food drives. And I keep on asking them, why do we do that? And that's because that's what we do. You checked on some woman who didn't, down the street, who you never talked to before. You thought she was a crotchety old woman, but all of a sudden, her snow wasn't shoveled. You didn't see the light on. So you knocked on the door, you found out if there was something that was wrong. And we did this throughout the state. We did it day in and day out. We didn't ask for anything. I participated in a lot of them. The best story I have is a woman come with a giant van, and she had everything in the van. And she said, "You guys can have everything but my husband. He's tucked in there somewhere." And so when I had a chance to ask her, I go, why did you give us all this? Why did you give the community all this? And a simple answer is because I remember when I was on the other end. And so Masons making a difference just was right.
Like you, I want the reaction from the public, or we call them the profane, to be that warm smile, that sincere gratitude that comes when you know you've done something good to make somebody's lives better. And that's really it. And that's one of the things that's special. I want to get to your charity of choice. Last year, we had Right Worshipful Daniel D. Natali come on as part of our Masonic Talks with Craftsman Online. And he shared a very moving program about the battle within. And what I found most inspiring about this program is it really is an example of Masonry, where we shine the spotlight on something only to stand outside of it so that the good work can be done. Can you tell us why this has become a charity of your choice? And for brothers who are unfamiliar with it, what's important about this cause?
We went to a function at Harmony Lodge, and both me and Joanne were there. And then I was asked if I would I was Deputy Grand Master, and I was asked if I would give a talk at a memorial, at the Memorial Day celebration. So I went home and I said, yeah, we'll write it. And I went flashing back 40 years to when I first encountered it. Of course, I didn't know I encountered it. A friend of mine who grew up across the street from me, and we were there forever. And when he came back from the war, he's different. I didn't know what was wrong. And what we did, because he just needed to move, we just took every imaginable bus route across the city, and we did this day in and day out because he was just restless. And I was there, and I didn't know that I was serving some sort of purpose because I was listening. But I wasn't listening close enough. I wasn't listening close enough to save my friend. When we went to that program, and he was also a defender of my wife. At the time we were going together, I was working at a bar, and so Joanne would come in, and Dino, as we called him, told her, don't worry about Joanne. She'll be in good hands. Nobody will do it. You can just take care of your business. And that's how we did things in Black Rock. She became one of us before she even knew she was one of us. And I saw him with our group a half hour before he took his life. And since we started doing this, now you can't believe how many cards that I've gotten and people have pledged that they're going to give money because of how Joanne feels about this and I feel about this. It's a travesty that a country such as the United States of America, who sends their best, their brightest, to save not only our way of life, but those of our allies who do the same. Sometimes they're not even our allies, but we feel it's necessary that we have to do some sort of police action. And they come back. And as many have told me, nobody comes back the same. Many have great coping skills. Some have decent coping skills. Some have no coping skills. The very thing that makes you a warrior works against you when you come back into civilization. It's no longer a weakness. Your strengths are turned against you. it's very hard, from what I've been told and what I've seen, for them to open up because, of course, their wounds aren't seen. But the more we do this, the more stories we get, the more we realize that we're doing good work. I think we're doing God's work. The Masonic War vets also decided to come on board with this, and their deal is teddy bears for veterans. Now, I didn't catch this when they went by, and I said, why do big strapping veterans want teddy bears? And he goes, because you have to understand, these bears are going to brothers in hospitals that sometimes the only interchange they have are with those that are working there. And they need something to remind them what they fought for, so that some young child could hold on to his favorite stuffed animal. And so they did that, and they put a silk screen of Joanne's pin on there. And with their combined help, we're also going to get service dogs. So this is taking on a life of its own. We have, of course, the pins. It was great. I got a call from a lot of my district deputies and told me, Grandmaster, we really like your pin, but everybody loves Joanne's. So what we had to do, we had to get another order of them. But we're gonna. So you can become a disciple. You can go out there and you can talk. You can support what we make by buying, the Battle Within pins, the cufflinks, memorial gardens, Let's Talk benches, and the Bears for Vet. This is a cause whose time is way past due. We cannot allow 20 or so each and every day for the past 40 years to constantly take their lives. It's not a glamorous cause by any stretch, but it's about as needed as can be. And I think also what we found in this, but we have to be careful on we go, but the same statistics are there for those in the police field and in the fire field. So we know firemen and policemen are also suffering the same. So it's not just battle, but it is a battle, but it's a different type of battle, if you understand what I mean. So this was just something that we just had to do. There was no thought about how to go about doing it. We had to go in 100%, and we're gonna do great things. We get nothing. I get nothing but positive comments, telephone calls, emails. Our fraternity, and we're going outside of our fraternity. And the next step is to start talking to some of my fellow grandmasters, and we're going to make this a national cause before we're done with it.
Well, this has been the Craftsman Online podcast. I want to thank my guest this week, Most Worshipful Richard Kessler, Grandmaster of Masons in New York State. Grandmaster, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's been my pleasure.
For regular listeners of our podcast, this is the point where I remind you that for more Masonic education, you can always visit us online at craftsmanonline.com, and the new episodes of our Craftsman Online podcast are available for download every Monday morning. But since we have a special guest being the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New York, we're going to follow our Blue Lodge protocol, which is the Grand Master always has the last word. So, Grandmaster Kessler, do you have any final words as we get ready to close out this episode?
This fraternity teaches you a lot about patience. And one time I was told by somebody, be careful if you pray to God for patience, because that is something he might give you. I ask each and every one of you to continue to work in your quarries. Do the best that you can within your lodges, and don't be afraid to reach out. Reach out for assistance. Don't try to do it alone. That's the purpose of us having a fraternity, is we're brothers. We have a network. Take advantage of our programs, the reading, training, and the social. And with that, so I don't go on forever, thanks again and have a good day.